Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so Disability Rights Iowa lodged a complaint in not that long ago, about a year ago, that Clarinda Academy was using kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. Could you kind of elaborate on that? What you found in your investigation?
Yeah, hold on a minute. I'm pulling the file to make sure that I'm reporting this accurately. We have so many things that go on here.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I want to make sure that pull the stuff properly. Hold on.
I appreciate that.
We had originally gotten involved there because we were following up on some girls from another placement and looked at their IEPs and said, these look good possibly individually, but when we put them all together and look at them as a group, it looks like there's a lot of copy-pasting going on. As well as issues with students that have behavioral goals or needs for a functional behavior assessment and a behavior intervention plan. That there was language in the IEP that essentially said, this is what we do at Clarinda. This is our behavior structure. These are the things that we require of students, and so this is the plan. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with special education law, but that flies in the face of the starting of the terminology of that law. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA. And what's the cornerstone of that act? The IEP, the Individuals Education Program. And so when you have this kind of one-size-fits-all approach, it definitely flies in the face of that. So what did we actually find there? I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
So we found that in our review, students that had functional behavior assessments and behavior interventions prior to arriving there, because it's a comprehensive residential treatment facility. So this is not just a special classroom within a public school setting. And it's places where kids are court-ordered. Anyway, in their previous placement, they had FBAs and BIPs. No longer had them at Clarinda. What changed? Was our question, because nothing seemed to change, and that ended up being the truth. They had a lot of, in our IEP forms in Iowa, there's an actual form, and I'm sure you guys have this in Illinois too, that tries to get at all the kind of requirements of the IDEA by putting it into a form, so that when you're sitting in an IEP meeting, you can make sure all the boxes, so to speak, are checked. Well, what we saw a lot of was boxes being checked that didn't make sense. If that makes sense. It would be like saying, this student has a behavior is an issue and will be addressed in the IEP. But then no behavior goal, no FBA, no BIP. So you're saying, okay, if behavior really is an issue, don't know, then should it be, if you have that box checked, then it should be addressed in this IEP. If not, then why is the box checked? And that type of stuff, that's just an example of multiple things that happen there, without getting into all the specifics.
So finding an issue, a behavioral issue, but not actually addressing it or having any plan to deal with it.
Yeah, or is there a behavioral issue and that box was just checked? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Right.
What we were seeing was, it looked like what was happening was boxes were getting checked on forms in which that didn't jive with the rest of the form. So you're saying, should this box be checked or not? Which leads one to believe that are we having full IEP, meaningful IEP team meetings here? are we looking at the individual's needs and strengths? And are we looking at then what goals need to be placed in there for that individual based upon evaluation, data, understanding the individual? And then are we progress monitoring that when we provide a certain bundle of supports and services with that student, right? To see, is this working? Is our specially designed instruction working? Do we need to change it? Is the goal appropriate? On and on. You know, the whole purpose, the whole point of having an IEP, right? Didn't seem to be followed. So I guess I could sum up a lot of issues in that way. Because we saw really a lack of individualization with academic goals. A lot of copy-pasting, so much so that the pronouns wouldn't match the gender.
Oh, that's terrible.
So you'd be talking about a he when it's a she.
Yeah.
Stuff that was copy-pasted in a way that it didn't match the actual goal. You're talking about something else. Like if it's a math goal, it might be talking about something else as a measurement. And so it was pretty egregious. Let's see. Supports and services. A lot of the just boilerplate kind of supports and services. So, you know, one student might really struggle in, let's say, math, and another student might struggle less. Maybe they're less grade levels behind, or you know what I mean. But they essentially all have, regardless of their deficit, they all have the same amount of time of service and the same type of service, whether it be pull-out or, you know, in the gen ed with special ed consultation type stuff. You know what I mean? And so, once again, it raises the red flag saying, what's individualized about this? Nothing, because it seems that, you know, if you have a problem in X, you get Y.
Right.
It doesn't have to do with what, do you need more time? Do you need pull-out? Do you not need pull-out? Do you need one-on-one? You know, what do you need? It wasn't really based on need as much as, like I said, more it looked formulaic. If you have a math problem, this is where kids with math problems go. It's where kids with math deficits go. What else here? I'm looking through it.
So how common are these problems? Are there other organizations that you found have similar issues?
Okay, so this is our... Yes, and this is where I would kind of temper this. What I wanted to say pretty much at the end of our discussion, but I'll say it. Yeah, it's a problem in other places. SQL is... I don't want to... I mean, they got beat up on this one.
Right.
And they were very cooperative in trying to work through it and make things better. And have, since the decision was made on the state complaint, which found all of our allegations to be true. And compensatory education was ordered for a whole lot of students. And so on and so forth. A lot of trainings provided that our area education agencies here in this state are providing more support. Clarinda had to do, SQL basically had to do a correction plan, which was acceptable. And they're still being overseen by the State Department of Education right now until this next month, which will be about a year, because the decision was handed down on August 21st, 2014. All that being said, we see this is, you know, this was a state complaint that came right on the heels of a state complaint we made for a state facility for kids in our juvenile justice system as well as our child welfare system. That was a huge complaint as well and had huge ramifications.
So there's not a lot of difference between public and private in this particular regard?
No. I think what the issue is when you have kids in institutional settings like this, the one-size-fits-all idea or culture runs rampant in facilities like that.
Yeah, it's
especially
easier.
in facilities that are, yes, exactly, and especially facilities that are working with court-ordered youth. Now, I would compare this also to, we have a company here in Iowa that does something similar to what you're talking about hiring SQL to do.
And what's the name of that company?
They're called Quebeca.
Could you spell that for me?
K-E, capital B-E-C-C-A.
Okay.
Now, once again, this isn't to drag their name through the mud either, but they have this similar cultural outlook on things. And so we've had problems with their classrooms in public schools here, where once again there is a lack of understanding about the requirements of what's required under the IDEA. Most kids in behavior programs are on IEPs, right? I mean, they don't tend to be in those classrooms because they don't have a deficit in social skills or behaviors, correct? And so they kind of had a one-size-fits-all approach, like, this is our program, this is what we do in Quebeca, this is how we take our data, this is how awesome we are, which in some regards they are, in some ways. But I think in their minds they thought, well, because we have this kind of our own thing that we do, and it's proprietary, and we think it's the cat's meow, therefore we don't really have to be knowledgeable about the federal laws and regulations that govern special education. And we ran into some very sad IEP meetings that I sat in as a representative for a legal representative for some clients that we have, that just the teachers couldn't answer basic questions about progress monitoring, goals, things like that. So I guess if you're looking into this, I would say if you're contracted with them, I would talk to your counsel.
The contract hasn't been written yet. We're still in the approval phase.
And I would make sure there's something in there, about, because I guess let me tell you a story, because I'm not your attorney, but let me tell you a story from the parent attorney perspective. The school district, one of them that I'm talking about that was using this particular entity, Quebeca, they were upset, to say the least. Because what they had done was just kind of said, okay, Quebeca, you're running this classroom. We're kind of hands-off. You're taking care of this. We assume that you know what you're doing because you said that you know what you're doing. And we're not going to monitor too much of what you're doing. And so then when we sat in an IEP meeting and we're going through huge deficits in these IEPs and looking at filing a due process that puts the school on the hook for possible compensatory education, which means money for the school district, they were saying, what are you doing, Quebeca? We thought you knew what you were doing. This is atrocious. And in their contract, I didn't care about their contract. That's not my problem. But from what I heard in their contract, they kind of had a contract where Quebeca did have all types of authority and there wasn't a lot of oversight. And there wasn't a lot the school district was able to tell Quebeca what to do. It was like they had their own thing going on.
That's good to know. I mean, especially when we're at this phase.
Exactly. So I would caution you to talk with your counsel and make sure they're involved and make sure that when you're writing that, if you do contract for it, that it be pretty specific.
Yeah.
I don't know how sequels. We haven't looked into sequels stuff in individual classrooms. They don't.
Right.
I don't know if they even do that here in Iowa.
Right.
They have 3 different facilities here in Iowa But in terms of actual classrooms within public schools,
no, this is the first. We're the first. That's why our parents are really wary of what's going to happen. So, I'm trying to
I would be weary, and I would be very watchful.
Yeah.
I mean, if that ends up we as a disability rights organization don't recommend those type of things. I'd say as our agency, and probably your P&A in your state probably wouldn't recommend it. Because our standpoint is, we should be, kids should be in the least, this is part of the requirement of the IDEA, a FAPE, a free and appropriate public education, in the least restrictive environment. So that's a highly restrictive environment that should be used minimally if absolutely needed. If the supports and services can be provided in a more integrated environment, then they should be. And if they need to be beefed up to do so, then that should happen, right?
Right.
So I think from that standpoint, the parent standpoint and the disability rights standpoint, that's the argument. Now, the reality is, some youth benefit from having classrooms that are more specific to what their needs are. But that should be done on an individual basis.
Right.
And I think what tends to happen, not because anyone's maniacal or anything, but what we tend to see when we have these type of classrooms in our school districts is it becomes the easy place for students to go. Just because you as educators have so much on your plate and you're already, underpaid and underappreciated, working your ass off to educate youth. You got all these requirements that aren't fully funded. And, what's going to happen when you have a place that's like, okay, Johnny, you're frustrating me. We've tried some things, we could try more, but this behavior disorder classroom would really be, I think, best for you. You know what I mean?
The catch-all for the kids.
Exactly. And it's not, like I said, I don't run into this and see maniacal, scheming teachers and educators and administrators trying to just be assholes. What I see is it's just the nature of what tends to happen when you have those type of classrooms in your district.
Well, I would say
over time, it starts out being like this. Okay, we're going to really do this right, and then over time, it becomes a place where everybody and their mom ends up being
a dumping ground.
Yeah, for students that bother teachers.
Well, I would say in defense of our particular school district, we have really good integrated classrooms for, my daughter has been in the same class with an autistic child for 3 out of her 4 years there.
Okay.
And they have integrated classrooms for learning disabled students. This would be specifically for behavioral disordered students who are currently being bused out of district to get those services. So I'm relatively to fairly confident that that it's not going to serve as a catch-all. So I would definitely be concerned about that. But I think our superintendent and our administration is committed to integrated classrooms for sure.
Okay, well that's something I would definitely watch. And I don't know. I can't answer the question if anyone else does it better than Sequel.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think there's something, a cultural way of doing things that's inherent in this. We deal with behavior, let me show you how we do it, and we'll do it in school.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's always bad, and I'm not saying it's going to fall apart. I'm just saying watch for that because that tends to come along with all these folks.
Right, so that's the red flag to look
not
for.
Not because they're maniacal, but because that just seems to be part of the culture of behavioral programs, whether they be residential or day programs or programs within the classroom in a school.
Okay.
Because they're a program.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why.
I have a question about something else I've seen in other articles from on Sequel. one complaint that's actually, I don't know if this is more or less disturbing than what you had to deal with, but I found one that found that the sequel was using restraint in excess compared to comparable facilities, to the point of, let me see what it was. It was something like 200 times as much restraint. Now, this was back in 2009, so they've been addressed. Have you heard anything about that specifically with regard to sequel, or any issues with restraint, or dealing with any kind of behavioral issues like that?
We were beginning to look into issues at their residential facility at Clarinda with their use of restraint overall. Mm-hmm. And we got sidetracked with a million other things.
Yeah.
So I can't say what we would find there.
Mm-hmm.
There are allegations
mm-hmm.
that it was being overly used, inappropriately used, and that prone restraint was being used, which is banned in our state, and I think in both states. But do I have proof of that? No. Did we do a full investigation? No. Did we sue anyone? No. So I can't really answer to that. I can answer to we saw with the Quebeca group a use of seclusion, more so than the school was using it as a whole. And their argument was, well, we have all the tougher kids.
Yeah.
But our argument was, well, actually, you don't have an appropriate behavior support system to have that as the last resort.
Right.
And they were unaware of our restraint and seclusion laws that govern our schools here. I don't know if you have those in Illinois. Not every state has regulations regarding the use of restraint and seclusion in schools.
I will look into that.
If you don't, and you have a certain policy or way of doing things in your district that limits that and wants to make that a last resort, then once again, I would have to talk with your attorney about that and see if it could be added to the contract in some way.
Okay.
To try to reduce use of restraint and seclusion, because once again, who's going to end up being the frequent flyers?
Mm-hmm.
It's with behavior disorders.
Yeah, for sure.
And then oftentimes, once again, that becomes a catch-all way of doing things, is what I don't see maniacal staff members. I see ones that are ignorant of de-escalation techniques and of the symptoms of that particular child's disability or mental health condition, and not understanding how to work with that particular child in such a way that it becomes easier to restrain them or seclude them.
Right. All right. I have one more question for you. The biggest issue I feel like we are facing here, we need services. We can't afford them, so they're outsourcing. I think that's understandable. We're trying to figure out if Sequel is a good company. But what parents are most concerned about here, and what I'm hearing the most, is largely fear and stigma around behavior disorders. There's a lot of fear of violence, disruption. We even had people who were scared of sexual assault in the bathrooms. There are a lot of people feel that these kids are going to be a threat to their kids in the traditional classroom. So I would like to ask you, what would you say to those parents who are concerned about what this kind of unknown quantity of students will be, and how would you respond to their concerns for the safety of their own children?
I think that's going to come through just educating your parent population there of kids that do not have behavior disorders or mental health conditions that cause behaviors, because I think education is key to
that's what I'm working on right now.
People understand who it is that's going to be in the building, what's going on, without identifying the students. We deal with that a lot I see that a lot in our state when we work with different school districts. And what frustrates us is, there's disciplinary issues that are dangerous that occur with typically developing youth that are not that can be single instance things that happen that are quite traumatic and horrible for people in the school. The kids, do you have some registered sex offenders in your your program? I mean, they don't tend, kids that have that type of issue tend to end up in our residential placements in our state, at least. You know what I mean? If they get some sexual assault charges or something like that, or sexual abuse is found in their family or happening, and oftentimes that's because they're the victim or have been victimized and are acting out if it's a child. They're not in the general school population to begin with. They're usually in treatment facilities. So I think it's education, and if you need help with that and educating people about persons with disabilities, and particularly disabilities that manifest themselves in behaviors, then I think that's looking to your own protection and advocacy agency there. The Illinois P&A, I can't remember what it's called. It's not that.
Is it the PBIS? Does that sound familiar?
No. I almost want to say it's Equip for Equality.
Equip for Equality. Okay, I found them. I will contact them.
Does it say Protection and Advocacy Agency on anything in it?
Yes, Protection and Advocacy System for Illinois. Yep,
exactly. So they're us in your state. There's one of us in every state. In U.S. territory that we're federally mandated to be in each of those. So
the
I would
PBIS,
give them a call.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Positive Behavior Interventions Systems.
Yes, interventions and supports. Yeah, that's. I'm going to be speaking with somebody from there later today.
Yeah, they're good as well. And then when you call your P&A there, they probably have some more local resources that you use to educate parents, to educate your public that's going to be in your school district that's concerned about all this.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. This was very informative, and I think it'll be helpful for our school board and the superintendent to hear what you have to say about your experience with Sequel and Quebeca, and I really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Keep up the good work.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.